Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating source document, one that claims ancient Hindu rituals were entirely based on modern scientific principles. We're going to take a structured, objective look at a text that argues all those daily habits, dietary rules, and even the social structures from ancient times. Well, they weren't just religious mandates. According to this author, they were actually highly advanced protocols designed for public health and survival. It's absolutely a completely different lens through which to view history, and we are going to break down exactly how this author makes their case.
So let's dive right in by asking the big central question that our source text attempts to answer. Were ancient Hindu traditions actually scientific? You see, the author of our document really pushes back against the idea that these long-standing practices are just outdated superstitions or some kind of hypocrisy. Instead, the text argues that these ancient rules were crafted by sages who possessed a deep, genuinely scientific understanding of the natural world. An understanding that, the author claims, modern science is literally only just now beginning to validate.
The author immediately hooks us in by drawing this direct parallel between the strict hygiene protocols of modern surgeons and the daily rituals prescribed in ancient texts. Think about it. Today, doctors know for a fact that millions of invisible, toxic germs enter and exit with our breath. Because of this, modern hospitals boil their surgical tools in hot water, doctors scrub their hands with medicinal soap, they wear rubber gloves, and they cover their mouths with masks to stop any microscopic bugs from getting into a patient's wound. Well, the text argues that this is the exact same logic behind the ancient mandates of thoroughly washing your hands, feet, and mouth before meals, and strictly avoiding unnecessary physical contact. To fully get a handle on the author's argument, we're going to move methodically through 5 main areas. 1. Modern science and ancient rules. 2. Methods of protection from germs. 3. Conductors, insulators, and vessels. 4. Scientific significance of clothing. And 5. The main purpose of traditions.
All right, let's start with Section 1, Modern Science and Ancient Rules. According to the text, the discovery of microscopic germs by European and American scientists simply validates the protocols that ancient sages designed thousands of years ago. The author points out that people in the West often eat with forks and spoons, tools that are specifically boiled or steam sterilized to avoid touching food with their bare hands. The document argues that this modern realization about the dangers of unseen germs, it's exactly what ancient sages discovered and built into daily religious rules for our health and benefit.
Moving right along to Section 2, Methods of Protection from Germs.
So, the author lays out this highly structured set of steps required before consuming what they call kacha, or perishable food. It definitely wasn't a casual process. First, bathe. Next, thoroughly wash your hands and feet. Then, put on specific clean clothes or sometimes no upper garments at all. And finally, eat strictly inside the designated kitchen area.
And this step right here brilliantly illustrates the author's logic. Eating in the kitchen, the chuka, wasn't just some random cultural quirk. It was a deliberate scientific choice. The text explains that the ambient heat radiating from the kitchen stove actually acts as a natural barrier. The claim is that contagious and poisonous germs simply cannot survive in that heated environment. Therefore, sitting in the kitchen to eat, freshly bathed, was a highly calculated method to use heat for environmental sterilization. Now, the document argues that these specific rules for hygiene and eating are not recent developments at all. In fact, it claims they've been consistently utilized for millions of years. For the author, the sheer longevity of these practices is proof of their hidden scientific efficacy. They argue that these rules stuck around because they actually worked to keep people healthy in a world that was full of unseen threats.
Which brings us to Section 3, Conductors, Insulators, and Vessels.
The text introduces a really fascinating theory here that we can call contagion via conductivity. It claims that materials that block electrical currents, things like glass, rubber, porcelain, and wood, also block infectious germs. Because contagion cannot penetrate these insulating materials, they are inherently pure and safe from contamination. Take a look at this table to see how the text categorizes materials based on this theory. Conductive metals like brass and bronze were viewed as high risk because they easily transmit electrical currents, and therefore, according to the text, they also transmit the currents of contagion. Conversely, insulators like wood and earth block electricity and contagion. The author uses this to explain several traditions, like it's why wooden vessels were historically placed at public wells, so any traveler could drink safely without spreading disease. It's why disposable earthen pots and leaves are used at large feasts instead of metal plates. The text even notes a tradition where mothers would actually hide brass and bronze pots during thunderstorms, fearing they would attract lightning due to their high conductivity. The author argues all of this demonstrates a profound ancient understanding of physics and contagion.
Okay, Section 4. Scientific significance of clothing.
So why would ancient traditions strictly mandate the use of silk or wool over simple, everyday cotton for holy ceremonies like yajnas and pujas? According to the text, the preference for these fabrics wasn't about luxury or showing off wealth. It was, once again, entirely about scientific utility and protection.
The document claims that silk and wool possess crucial scientific properties. Mainly, they're electrical insulators. Because electrical currents cannot easily enter these fabrics, the text argues that contagious germs can't enter them either. On top of that, the author points out that silk and wool resist fire. They scorch and smolder rather than bursting into rapidly spreading flames the way cotton does. They also maintain a stable temperature, neither heating up too quickly nor freezing. The author even throws in a surprisingly modern comparison, noting that train engine drivers specifically use woolen and silk rags to safely handle hot mechanical parts. For the author, ancient sages mandated these fabrics for rituals to basically give the practitioner a biological and thermal shield.
The text also tackles how these clothes were cleaned. The document compares the modern Western practice in cold climates of ironing washed clothes to kill remaining germs with the traditional Indian practice of sun drying. The author argues that India's intense solar rays provide a natural method of sterilization that is actually way more powerful than the heat of an iron. This, the text claims, is the exact scientific reason why sun-dried clothes are culturally considered more pure and sacred than clothes dried in the shade, because the sun's ultraviolet rays have physically destroyed the microscopic pests.
And finally, Section 5, the main purpose of traditions.
The author emphatically concludes that modern critics just completely misunderstand these ancient traditions. Taking off your shoes before entering a sacred or clean space, it isn't just a sign of respect. The text argues it's a strict barrier to stop infectious street germs from being tracked inside. The author states that what critics dismiss as hypocrisy or rigid dogma is actually based entirely on scientific necessity. And, perhaps most controversially, the document claims that the origins of untouchability and caste divisions were not born out of social prejudice, but originated purely from these extreme hygiene practices and the different exposure risks associated with various professions.
The document we've explored today presents a highly specific, fundamentally utilitarian view of ancient history, one where every single ritual, from the clothes worn to the pots used, was a calculated move in an invisible war against disease. Regardless of where you stand on the author's scientific analogies or historical claims, this explainer certainly leaves us with a compelling question. If we were to view all ancient human traditions strictly through the lens of early survival and hygiene protocols, how drastically would that change our interpretation of history? It's a fascinating perspective on how our ancestors navigated a dangerous world, and it definitely makes you look twice at the origins of our everyday habits.